Representative, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program tonight. It's great talking to you again.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for covering this important issue. I know to all your listeners, it's critical that we get it right, that we get it right in the DEA and obviously ATF doing their job again and not doing what clearly is so wrong.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, you and Senator Grassley have sent a letter to both the head of the FBI and the DEA. What is it you're trying to get from them? I know it has to do with the testimony from the head of the ATF, Ken Melson, concerning the paid informants that may or may not have had a role in Operation Fast and Furious. What can you tell us about what you're asking for?
Well, Ginny, not only did we find out from Kenneth Melson that, in fact, he was kept from speaking to us for a long time, but we also found out just how little the ATF really was at the center of this. Yes, their operatives were involved, but many of their people were kept in the dark, unaware, sort of left hand, right hand. So now we're appealing to justice to make clear what DEA knew and when they knew it, what justice knew and why they allowed ATF to continue having blind spots in the investigation that led to Americans and Mexicans dying.
Just to try to clarify for people out there, because, boy, every day there's something new has been uncovered. At this point, do you have any idea what the FBI was paying the informants to do versus what the ATF was trying to do to take down a major drug cartel?
Well, I think what's pretty clear is that the paid informants were part of the DEA side of it. They were informants whose primary role was to help them understand the flow of drugs. But they were, many of them were involved in the gun running activity, the supplying of these weapons to these kingpins. More importantly, they already were high enough that DEA and other people at Justice knew the very people that ATF was being told they were trying to follow the guns to find out about. So it really negates the whole idea that weapons being deliberately sold to bad people who were going to make sure they got to even worse people, that program never had any genuine purpose. More importantly, it gets right to the edge, if not over the edge, of American dollars, tax dollars being spent to buy guns, one of which might have killed Brian Terry, one of which might have killed Agent Jaime Zepeda.
You know, Congressman, we've seen some news reports highlighting back in 2009 in the Stimulus Act a $10 million allocation to Project Gunrunner. Have you been able to determine if any of that $10 million that was set aside went to Fast and Furious?
Well, we haven't been able to, and that's one of the questions we have. But more importantly, it's a real question for the American people broadly. Stimulus was supposed to create jobs. In theory, they were going to hire, quote, more ATF agents. In reality, this was simply a slush fund of money. And very much like Watergate or Iran-Contra, anytime you have loose money, you have results that ultimately are inconsistent with what the American people want. It's one of the reasons I voted against TARP, I voted against stimulus, is that these programs don't have the controls the American people expect to have on how money's spent. And I'm big for clandestine and other activities in which monies are made available, but the controls have to be tighter, not looser on those. And in this case, the controls coming out of Justice were non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, and the right arm didn't know what the left arm was doing. It's absolutely amazing the more that unfolds. But from what I understand, you've given the FBI and the DA, about a week to produce the documents you're asking for?
We are, and some people ask, well, why so short? Well, of course, starting in January, Senator Grassley has been asking for documents. We now know these documents were very available. In some cases, what we're really asking for is communication where the acting ATF Director Melson actually communicated some of these items that he's now sworn to. We want to have those turned over promptly. They're very easy to pick up. We don't expect them to be redacted. So the shorter time fuse is going to continue to happen where we have to discover documents that we asked for in broad descriptions we asked for months ago, and now we're asking for them very narrowly, not having had them properly produced. Clearly, the committee and the American people are tired of seeing redacted documents. What I mean by that is all the words covered up. And more we're finding out that documents which have been covered up, in fact, we're finding out the words underneath should have been made available, should have been provided to the committee. And that's part of what our new discovery with a short fuse is about, is documents we were entitled to, the American people had a right to know, that have been denied to the committee.
Yeah, and I was reading that the officials at the Department of Justice are saying they can't talk about paid informants. Are you going to be stonewalled once again on all that you're trying to do?
Well, we already know the names of the informants,
okay.
And we're not using those names publicly. We don't want them to use it. We can agree to informant number one, informant number two, but very clearly they knew about informants, and they didn't tell any of the 1,800 men and women of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Fire about them. They kept them in the dark, which meant they were not doing their job the way they should have been, and lives that could have been protected were not protected.
Representative, go way back to some of the first testimony we heard from ATF field agent John Dodson when he talked about his supervisors there at the ATF saying, look, there are a lot of eyeballs on us upstairs. There are a lot of people paying attention to this operation. Do we ever know who he was, or who those supervisors were referring to? Because again, as you talk about this absence of communication between these agencies and the ATF seemingly putting so much emphasis on Fast and Furious, there's just so much that doesn't add up.
Cameron, we're beginning to understand who those people are. They tend to be high-ranking political appointees at Justice. One of the things that came out in the testimony we received from Acting Director Melson is, in fact, that all along they've been pushing back and trying to push blame or responsibility to non-political appointees. Well, in fact, Lanny Brewer, Eric Holder, and the rest of the political appointees clearly were actively involved in this effort. And no surprise, the war against Second Amendment rights has been a war that Lanny Brewer has been involved in since the Clinton administration. Eric Holder certainly goes back to that same administration. So there's a secondary agenda. It's pretty transparent. We want to make sure we stick to Fast and Furious as our primary objective. But while the administration's issuing executive orders to limit gun owners' rights to buy without having a national database, we also have to look and say the actions speak very loud on behalf of the political appointees in this administration.
And what about those 12 DOJ officials? I know in one of your previous letters to Attorney General Eric Holder, you had asked for information documents from these 12 current and former officials, including James Cole and including Lanny Brewer. Have those documents started to come in?
No, they haven't. What we have done is, quite frankly, I've begun issuing additional subpoenas to get live witnesses to appear. Now, many of them are willing to appear, but we want to make sure Justice doesn't cancel them at the last minute. And that's been one of the frustrations, is that sometimes Justice will pretend to agree, and then at the last minute we don't get the people, and then we're 2 or 3 weeks further behind. We want to get this investigation done properly and promptly, so we're now making the assumption that Justice is, in fact, a non-cooperative witness, and although at times they deliver some, we have to assume that subpoenas will be and are required, and that everything is on the record. And we're going to continue doing that till we get to the final outcome, which in this case is making sure programs like this never happen again, that guns are never allowed to deliberately walk into bad people, and then used in some cases politically to stop law-abiding people from asserting their rights.
Now, I know you told us you expected to have more hearings. Any idea when those hearings might take place?
We are going to be continuing to interview witnesses. We expect to have public hearings no later than September.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I know Ken Melson was talking about the DEA and the FBI, but I remember when Agent Dodson was up there testifying, he talked about Group 7 and that the DOJ strike force consists of entities from DEA, the FBI, the ATF, and ICE. I've got to ask you, when you started this investigation, did you have any idea that you would be dealing with so many agencies doing so many different things?
Well, we knew initially that there were all the players at the table, including, to a certain extent, the State Department. Mm-hmm. What we didn't know is that DEA and Justice were, and even ICE, in some cases, were not telling other partners in this what they needed to know. That part was a surprise to us. You know, Jenny, after 9/11, we passed all kinds of laws and made all kinds of investments to prevent stovepiping. Now in a task force which is organized to prevent stovepiping, what you have is high-ranking political appointees at Justice ensuring that, in fact, secrets were kept from the partners in law enforcement.
And so again, I mean, I want to make it very clear here. You believe that that is where the breakdown in communication or the roadblock to communication began in the political appointments at DOJ?
I absolutely do. I've become convinced that two things are easy to understand. One is, at the local level, mistakes get made. At the local level, people come up with ideas that probably should not occur. But ultimately, there was no lack of communication up, and there was no lack of approval and oversight in the wrong direction by political appointees of this administration. And that's what we're really trying to focus on, is the people who were appointed and in many cases confirmed by the Senate to assert the policies of the president appear to be distorting the policies of America.
Do you think the information that you'll end up getting you hope to get, from the DEA and the FBI will take this investigation in a whole different direction?
Well, we think the direction it's going is the direction it's going to end up. It's going to show that the systems were not in place to stop reckless behavior if ordered by political higher-ups, and that many career professionals, to their credit, stood up and said no, but some didn't. They went along, and Americans and Mexicans are dead as a result. And I'm not going to cast excessive blame on those who didn't stand up, although Dotson and others who did stand up, I'm very proud that they tried to stop this and in some cases went public. Our whistleblowers I'm very proud of, but the system is such that political influence trumps often even vociferous objections to bad policy. And this was one of those cases. It's beyond Watergate. It's beyond Iran-Contra. It's a program in which it wasn't about the president or some political hack. It was about people who were supposed to be highly trusted, Senate-confirmed, who clearly took this country in the wrong direction, and Americans and Mexicans have died as a result.
All righty.
Congressman, again, we appreciate you coming on the program, sir, and look forward to doing this again very soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy.
Well, keep you posted.
Thank you. Representative Darrell Issa joined us here tonight on NRAnews.com.